So welcome to the March FASD United Policy and Training Center Forum. I'm Tom Donaldson, and I'll turn it over in a moment to our chair and director of the policy efforts, Jen Wisdahl and Susan Shepard-Carlson. Simply hello and best to everyone. Hope all is well out there in the FASD community. It's good to see you. A couple of quick things I wanted to just mention, which I hope you are already aware of. The Interagency Coordinating Committee on FASD meets this weekend, and it's available live by webcast. So I hope you'll look at this week's or a recent edition of the FASD United Roundup. You can find the link and all the information there, but please join that. That helps you, I think, get up to speed on what's happening at the federal level on FASD. They've got some great presentations. FASD change makers are presenting, and it's just a good way to hear, what's happening from a federal standpoint and elsewhere, throughout. And I also want to hope maybe you've had an interaction with Heather French, the FASD Family Navigator, and you know that we launched that project, that program in January. It's going very, very well. And we always like to hear from you because it helps us improve upon the work that we're doing. And not so much to remind you about the Navigator, but hopes that you will share the Navigator with others and let them know that that is a resource available to them. There's a lot to work out as we think about resources in the field from the FASD United organization, your organizations, members of the affiliate network, the new Navigator. The good news is I think we have more resources and more advocates than ever who are willing to talk with folks in the community, and particularly people who are new to FASD. So keep that in mind, and please reach out and share the news of the Navigator with others. Okay, now let's get on with the show, the business of today. And with that, Jen, hello.
Hello. It appears as though I cannot push buttons and talk at the same time. Before we get started too, I'd also like to recognize that we do have an intern working with us from University of California, Irvine, in the UCDC program. She competed and won a spot to intern specifically about policy in DC. And so she's going to be helping out over the next couple of months. Brandy Sue Madison is here with us, and we're excited to have her on board. So we did have some rather sad news happen in the last month. Don Young, the representative from Alaska, who was the lead author for our bill, unfortunately passed away. And Don was highly committed to the FASD cause. I went back and was looking, and he'd been sponsoring FASD legislation going back into the 90s. He was the longest serving member of Congress, and very, very tied in on a personal level. He mentioned during our Circle of Stars ceremony this last year that he had a personal family connection to FASD, and so it's with great sadness that we mark his passing. So we are looking for a new Republican champion in the House for FASD, and this is a really good time for you to connect with any Republican lawmakers in your state, and just start grooming them to become the FASD champion that we know they all can be. Definitely we want Democrats too, because FASD has no party affiliation. It's a bipartisan issue, but that was a big loss to lose Don Young, and like I said, we were very saddened by his passing.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, Jen, I just want to say that as far as process, his name remains on all bills that he's sponsored, so he'll remain a co-sponsor, but obviously, you don't have his staff you know, there's going to be a new member in Congress from Alaska. They'll probably do a special election. So it's a real loss. We were able to do a Dear Colleague, an updated Dear Colleague letter about 2 weeks before we lost Don Young. So we have that and we can use that. And his staff worked with us on that. It also hit the FASD family policy team. Mike Young, who you've seen, he's actually participating in a lot of the events this week. He was a former chief of staff for Don Young several years ago, and close to the family and to a lot of the staffers. So yes, it's sad, but then there's always an opportunity that this will he'll be able to his memory and what he's done with FASD could translate to other members of Congress, the attention on FASD. So, and I know Representative McCollum's office was going to do some social media today. I think the service is today. So,
Yeah.
okay, that's it. That's all I needed to say about that, Jen.
All right. So last month we invited some folks on to talk about state legislation and the exciting things that they're doing in their states to move legislation forward and move the cause of FASD forward individually in their own states. And we're watching these initiatives very closely, because what we'd like to do is learn from the things that are happening now, take what's working in terms of legislation in states, and then replicate that and offer support and technical assistance in replicating those successes into other states. So really working at policy initiatives from a state level, but also from a federal level, and meeting them in the middle there. So there are a few of you who presented on the last call, but if there's anyone who has updates from the folks that were giving state updates last month, and you'd like to give an update on where your bill is now, this would be a great opportunity for you to step in if you feel comfortable doing so, and just giving a little update on your bill.
I can go ahead. I'm Annette Kunzman. I'm with FASD Network of Southern California, and we have a bill that that I spoke about last week, SB 1016, which is championed by our Senator Portantino of California. We're lucky that we got him as our champion. He's very senior, has a lot of power. He's the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and it was introduced, the bill was introduced February 14. It was referred to the Senate Education Committee. And we were preparing to go to Sacramento for the education hearing on March 23rd. But we found out the Friday before that it had passed out of the Education Committee. We had no opposition. And it was all aye votes from the senators on that committee. So that was good news. And so then it was referred to the Appropriations Committee. So like I said, our champion is chair of the Appropriations Committee. I learned yesterday that it was one of the bills slated for the Senate Appropriations hearing, Senate Appropriations Committee hearing for this coming Monday, April 4th. But then I heard that he's probably going to put this in the suspense file. He's going to waive the being heard, and it's going to be put in the suspense file. So what that means in California is that any bill that may have more than a $50,000 impact, that's a very low threshold. If any bill might have more than a $50,000 impact on the budget, goes to the suspense file. So then that will give the committee more time to assess what the fiscal impact will be. And we haven't associated any dollar amount with this bill, as we feel it's not going to have that much impact. And we know from the state of Alaska, they've said that they've seen no fiscal impact based on their passing a similar bill. Again, SB 1016 would include FASD as an eligibility criterion for under other health impairment for special education services. So that's what we have for now. We're in suspense.
Fantastic. But I think the good news that's coming out of this is knowing from the state of Alaska that they saw no increase to their special education cost or budget. That's really good data to have if we're looking at, again, expanding FASD into the OHI category under IDEA. And additionally, if we can get this put through in California and get some data there, California is the size of a small country. I mean, their budgets are astronomical. So the data that we take from there too can be really helpful in replicating this kind of legislation in other states. So really, really watching that closely. I would encourage you all at this point too, to within your state, if you're not familiar with how the legislative process works in your state, because it's different in every state, get a tutorial, find out. That would be your homework for this month. Figure out how laws get passed in your state. And then if you are interested in getting legislation like what Annette got passed or is working on in her state, find out who your committee members are on the education committee, and then find out who your committee members are on the appropriations committee, and maybe start getting to know them. Start figuring out who they are. If there's an event that you can attend where you can meet up with them, just start getting to know them and getting to know the people who are in your state working on similar initiatives. So homework for this month, figure out how bills get passed in your state. Any other updates on other bills that are being worked on in other states?
And
Catherine, awesome.
I can just let you know from Florida, in Florida, it doesn't work as a bill to request funding. It's just an appropriations request, which we submitted for $450,000 to start a second satellite clinic in Florida. It has gone through the legislature. It is in the final budget. They have not given the budget to the governor yet. He has 16 days to sign it. And today, Florida is a mess politically. I mean, that's all I can really say. Today, the governor vetoed the legislation that he was given by his Republican legislature on the redistricting map that they gave him. And he's calling him back into special session to draw a different map of the state. So I think that's where Florida's focus is. And then hopefully we can just slide right under the radar and he'll sign it and we'll be good to go.
Fantastic.
That's it.
That raises a really good point, because there's more than one way to get things done legislatively. One is by passing a bill. The other is through appropriations. So really finding out who sits on your appropriations committees in your state, because they have a lot of power. If you have an existing program that FASD could fit into, and you could get more funding for an FASD focused program through that appropriations line item, that's also a really viable way of getting more FASD informed care and services in your state. So, oh, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Well, and I wanted to give an update on Christy Petrenko's efforts in New York. As you recall, those that were on the webinar last month, they're trying to get FASD included under DD services, and they got pushback from the state of New York, and basically saying that FASD is not listed as on the CDC website. They don't have the diagnostic guidelines for other conditions other than fetal alcohol syndrome. And Christy did a masterful job in responding to their point by point. I thought she could be a trial lawyer. I mean, she really did a good job. And her arguments could be replicated for other states if there's pushback on that, and also on the costs. And it could be used also for the federal level. So thank you to Christy. And we've got that. We can share that, Jen, on the policy center so other people can see it and use it.
Yeah, that will be published very shortly on the policy site. Yeah. Anybody else want to speak to state happenings, or I will move on. Let's see.
Jen?
Yeah. Oh, Kristen. Oh, you muted again, Kristen.
I must have double clicked. I know we have talked, actually, I would tell everybody here that we reached out to Jen and Susan to talk a bit about, or was it you, Susan, or was it Susan Ellsworth? Now I can't even remember.
Probably Susan Ellsworth.
But well, I've reached out to all of you, and if you have a question about something, these are the people to go to. That's first and foremost. And also, I do know Heather French. She was in my Jeff Noble group with me, and so I'm anxious to chat with her tomorrow and pick her brain more for, again, more support and information. But in Massachusetts, myself and my program coordinator is Laura Bedard, and we just took over in January here in Massachusetts, and it's a very small FASD, a small chunk of whatever we have. It's very small. But Enid Watson was our predecessor, and she was working on a bill which is making its way. It had made its way to a certain point, and basically in the definition of a developmental disability in Massachusetts is not the same as the federal definition. And so that's what she was working towards, is taking out the 70 IQ and taking out just certain diagnoses and making it changing the wording of the developmental disability to match the federal. And we're at a point now where it's made it to the Healthcare Finance Committee, and we're supposed to hear something by, I guess it's supposed to come out of committee tomorrow, I guess. That's the last I heard about it, but I don't know what else to say about it.
What I really like about what you're doing, and I think is so smart in Massachusetts, is they are partnering with a number of other developmental disabilities groups on this act. And I think there is power in numbers. So they are partnering with the ARC, you're partnering with Disability Rights, I believe. Yep. So I think that's really smart. And this is something also that California did that I thought was very intelligent, is building a coalition. One organization on its own is far less impactful than a coalition of organizations working together towards a common cause. So, and I really appreciate you speaking up on this, Kristen. I'm glad you did. I'm very glad you did. So we'll keep on these meetings popping back and revisiting the state legislation, because I think it is equally important to the federal legislation. They work in tandem. And so I hope you find the state piece as interesting as I do. So moving on, for federal updates, we've had a couple of recent things happen that really aren't in conjunction with the FASD Respect Act, but we wanted to go over them anyway because it may have some impact on the Respect Act. And Susan, I'll kind of leave these ones up to you. Okay. Unfortunately, Kate's not here to help out with this as well. Right. But
so President Biden just released his budget. And if you are having trouble sleeping at night, it's good nighttime reading material. And in that, on page, it's in the Health and Human Services part where they provide justification for their appropriations. You go to page 541, and there's some language related to the Center for Disease Control's appropriation for the fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And just a reminder that currently that figure is $11 million. And we advocated to increase that by $1 million, and the House committee, and we're talking about for FY 2022, which recently passed in that omnibus bill. Okay, so now the president's budget is out for FY 2023, and in that there's a section from the CDC that talks about FASD, and they have language that quotes the House committee report language that urges CDC to expand prevention efforts. Well, you can see the language there and where that's quoted, and that's really important because that language from the House is telling CDC, we really want you to do that. And that was the language we had given to Representative McCullum to get that into the report. Unfortunately, the Senate did not, and we asked for the $1 million, and unfortunately the Senate didn't do it. So in this report, they say, we would love to be able to do it, and you would like us to do it, but you didn't give us the money. So that really highlights, that the House is really interested in this issue, and we would love to be able to do it. And so it will help in our arguments on the FASD Respect Act, as well as increased appropriations for CDC. I know that sounded like Greek, and it probably was, but all of these kind of pieces fit in, and it's, it's on making sure that we keep this front and center in the committees, how appropriations and policy committees. Jen, if you want to add anything to that.
I think Greek is the word, but bottom line is it's good press. It's keeping FASD in front of the lawmakers and just being that nagging little bug so that when we're hitting them with the bill, this is not something unfamiliar. In advertising, it takes a certain number of hits before something connects with somebody. Well, this is just another one of these hits. All right. The other thing that happened, there is sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Okay, no, well, the Senate Help Committee, which is the policy committee, they've been having hearings on substance abuse and mental health. And they are going to be developed, and this is really important, they're going to be developing a bill having to do with substance abuse and mental health. And so we've been submitting questions both to Senator Murkowski and Senator Tina Smith, who's from Minnesota and also on that committee. And one of the questions that was presented to this psychiatrist from Boston Medical Center, you can see the question, and basically it's, do existing systems of care recognize FASD? Or do you believe a lack of identification could be a significant gap in treating these individuals for their mental health disorders? And what are the barriers in integrating this into our existing systems? And the reason that's important, because that's exactly what the FASD Respect Act is designed to do, is to do that. And so we were really anxious to hear what the psychiatrist and basically his response back, we just got it, was to talk about the HRSA, Boston Medical Center grant that we all know that's a $2.9 million grant that two of our affiliates are working with Boston Medical Center on screening prenatally and also identification of those with an FASD. So I think his answer really is telling, because it tells basically that, oh, we have this one pilot program. That's all I'm aware of. I mean, otherwise he would have answered it in a more fully. So that's we can go back and start to talk about the Respect Act and why we need to put provisions into that mental health and substance abuse bill And so that was another thing that went on since our last webinar.
All right. The Respect Act, the star of the show. Co-sponsors, we added 5 new co-sponsors in the House in March. And I went back and looked. So over the last 19 years, there have been 9 bills in some form or format that have tried to do pieces of what the Respect Act has tried to do, is trying to do. And in those 9 bills over the last 19 years, the most co-sponsors we've ever had is 8. Most of the bills died in committee with about 2 co-sponsors. That's it. So I really want you all to reach around really well and give yourselves a pat on the back, because we are doing something here that has not been done before. We have never had this kind of concentrated push and effort by all of you folks to get comprehensive FASD legislation passed since the 80s. So that was really exciting and heartening for me to know that we're making quite a bit of progress here. So current Senate sponsors, no new changes there. They are employing the Noah's Ark method of legislative policy in the Senate, looking at adding a Republican and a Democrat at the same time, or at least a Democrat and an independent at the same time. So we're going to find typically when somebody enters as a Senate sponsor, they're entering in pairs.
But I think what's good with the ones that we have, that they are many of them on the help subcommittee or help committee.
Yeah, and the good news is, and again, FASD does not have a political affiliation. It's bipartisan, but strategically having more Republicans on the bill in the Senate, because the Senate Help Committee is really trying to push bipartisan legislation, that's really helpful for us to have as many Republicans on as we can there. In the House, it's an entirely different kettle of fish. So we have 3 reps on committee that are co-sponsors of the bill. They are all Democrats. And really, we only have 3 Republicans out of all of our co-sponsors on the bill. So this is where we've got a lot of work to do. And we've done a great job so far. All of you have done a fantastic job so far, reaching out to your 2 senators and your rep, getting your meeting, having the meeting with the representative, following up with the representative and the senators, and then having them come on board as co-sponsors. That's been really an effective way of doing things. Now we're at the point where we need to get a little bit more strategic. We've broadened it up. Now we're going to get more strategic in how we move forward, because we've had some really great meetings with committee leadership and know what we need to do to take the next step and move it forward. So in March, we met with Cardenas in California, Neal in Texas, Peters in California, Spears in California, Pelosi in California, and Peter Welch in Vermont. Our meetings are creeping up a little bit slower in terms of our overall meeting count, because now we're going back and we're meeting with representatives' offices all over again. We see a lot of change with legislative assistants, particularly in the healthcare portfolio for whatever reason. And so sometimes we're going back and we're meeting, it's like we're starting all over again with this representative because they have a new health LA. And so this is why that follow-up with after you've had a meeting with your representative or your senator is so important, because you never know if the person that you convinced that, hey, this is a great cause, we need to get my boss on board with this, has moved. And also, we don't know if this person that was maybe like, I don't think this is a big deal, I'm not going to pitch this to my boss, maybe they've left and there's somebody who's a bit more receptive that's come on board. So really key to keep following up there. In the House, just looking at our coverage, we're starting to paint the map. This map is feeling a lot better than it did when we got started. And what I like about this is that this really shows the breadth of the reach that we've had. And each one of those states that's colored in means that there are people working in DC that are aware of FASD and are ready to move things, hopefully move things forward, but at least they're aware of it when they maybe haven't been before. In the Senate, same thing. We've covered 50 senators so far. That's half of the US senators we've met with their offices. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm pretty proud of all of you. I'm just going to check the chat really quick because I see a whole bunch of bung, bung, bung going on in the chat. And I know I'm kind of missing it as I'm talking. So if there's anything key there, Susan, if you don't mind bringing that up.
Yeah, well, and one of the things, we had a meeting with Senator Reed from Rhode Island. And as you can see from the maps, Rhode Island is still gray. And we'll put that in. But one of the things, and Kate Boyce knows Senator Reed personally and talked to him it's amazing. Kate goes to a lot of fundraisers and talked with him personally. And so his Health LA got back to us and said, well, he's very interested, but is there anybody in Rhode Island that's interested in FASD? So we're trying to reach out to see, we haven't had any. So if any of you know anybody in Rhode Island, I don't know if Beth is on, she knows everybody, she's gotten us into Vermont, but I think we could get Senator Reed on board if we had some Rhode Island action. So.
Rebecca too. Beth and Rebecca are two networkers around the country. So and Annette, if you know anybody in Rhode Island, we want to know. All right. So path forward, this hasn't changed, but really we do want to get it pushed through the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee. And what we've been told by Speaker Pelosi's office, by Pallone's office, by Eshu's office, so all of the key leaders that we've met with, is that we need to get a Republican on committee on board on the bill. So this is where the strategy comes in. And I really want to lay that out so we can find that key person, particularly with the passing of Don Young. It's important that we find another Republican to be a bit of a champion for FASD. So meetings with committee members, we've met with 20 out of 29 in the House. And then we've met with 17 out of 22 in the Senate. Bill Rockus in Florida is a key person. We have a meeting scheduled with him next week. Kathy McMorris Rogers, Republican out of Washington State, have a meeting scheduled with her next week. But any of these folks that you see here that we haven't met with yet, particularly if there's an R by their name, we need them. Those are ones we absolutely positively need to meet with. So if there's any help or support you can give there, if you have any family in those states, in those areas, that's been an effective way of getting meetings and getting in front of people. And I am going to make these slides available on the policy site along with the recording, so that way you can see these lists. So looking at the big bad list, and this is probably really hard to see and it's going to make you cross-eyed, and I'm very sorry. This is the full list of committee members. And as you can see, it's a balance between Republicans and Democrats. But really look at your state and see if there's anybody there that might be worth hitting up again for the second, third, 47th time to see if you can get them on board. Like I said, we do have Bill Rockus scheduled for next week. We've got Kathy McMorris Rogers scheduled for next week. And we have Buddy Carter in Georgia scheduled for next week. And Georgia was an interesting one. Buddy Carter Melissa, I'm going to call her out here, has been reaching out to Buddy Carter's office religiously since we met with him. I want to say it was back in like June or something ridiculous like that. And really, his legislative assistant was not the easiest to deal with. He actually gave us the wrong email address to follow up with him. He was that bad. And as it turns out, he's got a new health legislative assistant now. So we're circling back and meeting again. So that's why I say just keeping up that consistent contact. And if you don't hear anything back, doing a little homework and seeing if maybe the staff has changed, and connecting with the new person can be really helpful.
And I want to say Buddy Carter's also sponsored a bill that passed out of Energy and Commerce and went over to the Senate on the CDC. So there's a tie-in with that. And of course, he's from Georgia, where the CDC is located. So, and was a good friend with Representative Don Young. So there's those connections.
Any questions on approaching any of these legislators? Sorry, you know, Kathy Hotelling had a good question in the chat about emails bouncing back, and yeah, that does mean the staff has changed. You can go to Legistorm and look up who the staff is, legistorm.com, I believe it is, or BillTrack50.com is another place that you can go and check and see who the staffers are in a particular politician's office. Those are some of my favorite resources, but if you don't know, just email me and I'm happy to send you that information. And Annette, I think I saw your hand up.
Yes. Oh, shoot. Now, what was my question? Oh, sorry. I was listening to your last answer. I have tried for over 6 months to get into Nanette Berrigan's office. You call the office, there's no, I leave messages, I've emailed and emailed. I'm not really sure what to do in that situation. And, I feel like that's a key representative on the committee, but I just can't get through. Any suggestions other than physically going to their LA office?
Well, let's see. Melissa, you had some success hunting them down at a parade, right?
Oh, okay. I just
connecting with one as they got on a parade float. But I would say, do you have a constituent in that area?
Yes. Yes.
And the constituents reached out as well?
I have reached out on behalf of the constituent. I will have them try more directly, but yes, I've been trying to work with constituents in that area.
Have you tried, Annette, have you tried different people in his office? Because maybe going, getting the.
Yeah, I'm going to get more creative. Okay.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, because you never know. I mean, it could go just to the constituent services and they don't know what to deal with it. But maybe
I've called the DC office. I call the local office, but they don't man that phone for some reason.
If you get like the personal email for the, the legislative director.
I have one of those that they're just not, that person is not responding. So I do have to find somebody else in that office to that's what I would harass. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. And I see a hand up from Karen's iPhone.
Hi there. Sorry. Hey, Annette, for Annette, I just happen to be meeting with somebody tomorrow. She's more of a state former lobbyist, but in case she knows of somebody, just Sacramento. I mean, Sacramento's a small place, really. But if you know of, so I just want to ask you, Berrigan is a congressperson from the Los Angeles area.
Yes, she's a U.S. representative from LA County.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. I'll just ask and see if there's anybody else to unearth.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Lost my mouse here for a second. There we go. New endorsements in March. we had a great big long list. I want to give a shout out to our friend Julia Rivera down in Texas. She had done a presentation on FASD at the National Learning Disabilities Association conference. And we've had a number of learning disabilities associations from many states sign on. The head of that program is committed to following up with as many states as possible and has asked that she be the one to do that and get the states to sign on. But this is an area that can be highly beneficial in terms of getting representatives to sign on if they see what other organizations are interested. So if you go to the policycenter.org under organizations, there's a really quick sign-on form. You plunk your name and email address in it and you're signed onto the list. And that's usually updated fairly regularly on the website, at least once a week. So if you want to send that document to your legislator as a follow-up piece or as a way to get a meeting, always download it from the website as opposed to saving it to your computer, because the updated list will always be there. And I really want to thank these organizations for signing on too, because this is part of building that coalition. So if you're in a state and you're working on FASD and you see other organizations have signed on, I really encourage you to reach out to them and talk to them about the bill and talk about ways you might be able to help them and ways they might be able to help you. Because FASD, we tend to be in our own circle, and we're in our own circle because we don't get a lot of help and support from outside the circle. But only when we bust out of that circle are we going to be able to get things to move forward. So that's kind of just a challenge and a little bit of homework to all of you too. If there's organizations that have signed on to support that have not, that you're not familiar with, definitely follow up with them and just thank them for their support and see if that can start a broader conversation about how FASD could be brought into their organization and what we could do together to build a coalition and get things happening for everybody in your state. So sneak peek, I'm super excited and my geeky, nerdy little heart is loving this. I want to give Cole from Wisconsin a huge shout out for a fabulous idea. We are in the process of setting up a text platform that you would text a code to a certain phone number. And from that code, it will deliver a letter to your two senators and your rep, encouraging them to support the FASD Respect Act. So I'm hoping to have that launched by the end of the week, and I'll roll out more details and email everybody with that. But that is something that we're going to be pushing a lot on our social media as well, because we've done the piece where we've asked everybody to reach out to their two senators and their reps and set the meetings. And we've noticed that our meetings have really slowed down because the people who are able to do that kind of work have done it already. And so this is not taking the place of the follow-up. This is not taking the place of targeted reach outs, but this is a way of capturing maybe some of the more passive folks that are involved in FASD work, or individuals with FASD, or caregivers of individuals with FASD, or people who maybe are in a little bit more crisis and just don't have the time to be able to do anything other than text. So we're hoping that this will really expand the reach. So really be looking for that information coming up here soon. The other thing we're going to start doing, and this is something we haven't done before because it's not as effective as the constituent reaching out themselves, but in states where we really haven't gotten any traction, I'm going to go ahead and start reaching out to the senators and the representatives on behalf of constituents in that state and trying to set up some meetings. So if you are in a state where I'm doing that and you're actively involved in FASD policy, I will obviously connect with you first. I'm not going to go in where you're already working and try and mess things up. or step on any toes. But if you're in a state where you just haven't had time to get to it, the time is now, and I'm here to help. The other thing we've launched is that we do post quite a bit of information and updates to the FASD United policy page. Usually it's 2 or 3 items a week that you can use to connect with your lawmakers, use to connect with, reconnect back with staffers that you've already met with. Just keep them engaged, keep them pushing along, because again, we know it takes roughly 5 connects before we get a lawmaker to sign on to a bill. So we have an automated email now that will go out to you with a digest of those items. So you don't have to go looking for it. It will come to you. And you can opt out of that. It's a subscription thing. You can just hit unsubscribe if it's clogging up your email box. I totally understand that, and I won't take offense. But it's just a way of getting taking the passive out of it and putting it a little bit more active to you. So if you have any suggestions for things you'd like to see put up on the website, the information we talked about from Christy Petrinko, that's one that we'll be putting up there shortly. I'll make sure I republish and resend out the Dear Colleague letter so that all of you are seeing that again. But again, anything that you feel like would be worthwhile to have on there, please do let me know, and I will have information on how to use the Text Connect piece there. We are working on some new social media around the FASD Respect Act that Brandy is working on that we should have rolled out here soon. Just to kind of revitalize it, brush the cobwebs off, let's keep going, because we're kind of in the home stretch here, and I really think we can do this. I will be very excited to meet with you all next month, the last Wednesday of the month, to talk about how these meetings that we're having this month go, and hopefully we can get that Republican on the bill and get us pushed through the House. So I'm going to, at this point, let's see. Oh, one other quick reminder. If you already are doing a state proclamation for FASD Awareness Month, fantastic. If you are not, or you have not, definitely check out the resource we have published on the policy page. It gives you some templates and some guidelines and some best practices for how you can get that going in your state. And the goal is to have one in every state this year if we can. And it does take about 6 months to get your state proclamations up and going. So this is really the time to be doing that and looking at it now. The other little piece of news is that we will have the new RunFast website. RunFast is the national virtual 5K that was started by self-advocate Rebecca Toulouse. And we've got some great options coming up this year, low-cost options for families. We have the ability for organizations to list a meetup location where people can get together and meet together. So really exciting stuff coming there, and I'll roll that out as it's available too. So at this point, I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. Otherwise, congratulations, you get 10 minutes of your life back.
I can't believe this group has no questions. Or comments.
I think I finally talked. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just make a comment that this was a great meeting. Thank you so much for the work and putting all of this together. And just to re-emphasize what both Susan and you and Jen have said, that if other states are pushing through legislation on DD and different terminologies and changes and moving that at the federal level, it would be so helpful to know and share that. Like Christy's rebuttal was like, you're right, she she should be a lawyer, except we need her where she is too. I think we should give her an honorary legal degree or something. And because while we were talking, I sent that to our lobbyist to request a special, here in Florida, it's called a special study on an issue. If there's a fiscal note that's killed a bill, which happened to us on our DD, developmental disability bill this year. It was killed because of the fiscal note the agency put on it. So he just went and submitted that request for a special study, which they are required to do. And so we can now take the points that they put in the fiscal note and use some of what Susan wrote as a part of a rebuttal. So that is just, it's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over. And also if you can say, well, I can't say in Florida, this is how they did it in New York, or I could be shot. But I was told that the day I moved down here, don't ever say this is how we did it in New York. And so I don't. I just say another state did it this way. So I really, I think that's a great idea. Just keep telling people what you're doing, how it's moving, how you're getting through some of these barriers that every single state is facing. And I think for a lot of us, if we don't change some of the stuff at the federal level, it's not going to trickle down. And the states are going to say, if the feds don't change it, we can't change it. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, I'm very excited for next congressional session to see how many states are introducing FASD policy. And how many states are really piggybacking on the work that's being done this year. So
Well,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I did want to make a comment because we are optimistic, and I know both Jen and I are optimistic people, but we are optimistic that this will pass this Congress. And so that means you all in your states need to begin to be ready for what happens in your state. And and this is just, I know we've gone over the provisions of the bill, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that section where funding is coming to your state. It's there's a certain amount that will go to every state. They have to apply for it, but every state will get that for it, what we call administrative costs. So there's a certain amount that will go. And then there's an amount that's is competitive depending on the appropriation and what the proposal is. And so that's for states that are able to right now say, well, we already know that we need money for diagnostics or training, whatever it is. And so it's not totally a block grant where you think about every state gets a certain amount. No, you have to, what you need to do is to have that that agency in your state say that we're the agency that's that has the authority to get the money, and we have an advisory committee made up of the other agencies, and more important, and also including if there's an available FASD advocacy organization to consult with them in the application. So that's the kind of the nuts and bolts how that's going to work if that section remains intact. So I just wanted to, I was going to say that earlier, but now I think it was a good way to end. So you guys, you can start thinking, put your thinking caps and start, how's that going to work in your state?
Thanks, Susan. And Marilyn, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I think it's related to what Susan was just saying. I had contacted my state representative who's very active in the mental health advocacy, and she invited me to testify yesterday at the committee that handles human health and human services, because they're trying to pass a bill to add 125 beds, like residential beds, to the state. And so I felt it was important to testify, because what I did was point out that behavioral health, which they're starting a whole new behavioral health department in Colorado, that behavioral health is not just mental health. And I'm able to talk about my own son with fetal alcohol syndrome. And I was able to mention FASD and mention all the different reasons besides mental health where people have behavioral issues. So to me, it's nice just to get that word out, that those people heard that on that committee.
Yep.
You know, whenever we can speak up, it's an awareness thing. But I was very nervous, and I got to speak for 3 minutes on Zoom, but because at the moment I'm in Florida. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
I think that's a really good point, though, that you bring up, Marilyn, is, whenever in a political sphere you can talk about FASD and bring it to mind, it's a smart thing to do, because who knows, one of the lawmakers that was listening to you speak might be one of the lawmakers that we end up having as a champion in your state for future FASD legislation. And I was having a conversation this last week with a really great advocate, and we were talking about, the need for training and awareness in all of our states. And it really does boil down to policy, because we're not going to get that widespread training and awareness without organizations that do it having funding specifically to do it. And we're not going to get funding specifically to do that without policy. So I think this is just so critical that we're all taking part in this process, and we're all really working towards this common goal of getting FASD policy put through. We may have differences of opinion on what policy that is or how it's done, but I think having policy at the core of what we do as advocates is really a key factor. And I just want to thank you all for being here and being part of that, because I always say at the end of each presentation, together we can do this, but it's very true. And we've never had the kind of political advocacy push that we have now. And I'm just so excited to see it grow and where it goes from here, regardless of what direction it goes in. Again, I'm very optimistic that we're going to get this bill passed this year. I do not want to have wasted 2 years of my life, but I don't think it would have been a waste regardless, because all of you are now activated. We've connected with so many lawmakers who now have FASD at least on their radar and know what it is. That's huge. So I'm looking forward to next month. Again, that's the last Friday of the month, or last Wednesday of the month. My apologies. You will always get an email reminder beforehand, or you might get 4 or 5 if I push the wrong button and send it out wrong. Sorry about that this month. But I look forward to the updates, because I think April's going to be a pretty exciting month for us. So,
Yep.
Any last questions before we sign off? We're hitting the top of the hour.
I just want to add one more thing, and then I promise I'll shut up.
Never. We don't want you to.
Well, they do, but that I don't believe we would have gotten as far as we have this year with this. I just think it's an amazing advocacy push and moving forward without you, Jen. And you wouldn't be here if we didn't have the funding that the board committed to hire you, because this position is so critical. And I think that just speaks to, you can't do this work without the money. So we're going to get the money and make everything else happen.
Thank you. Really kind words, but a very good point that policy does not happen without funding. Yeah. All right. Well, I will leave you all to run about the country doing the great work that you do. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Jen. I just wanted to say that I did meet with Professor Lawrence, who used to be the advisor for Nancy Pelosi, and he's currently looking at our bill and giving us advice of what to do. So he's my mentor. So for some of you guys who don't know, so I'm here with the UCDC program, as Jen mentioned, and I'm taking a class called Congress in Transition with the Professor Lawrence. And so I'm really excited, and I'll give you guys an update of what he says about it. So that's what I want to say right now. Thank you. One more thing I just want to say. He said it's great to get a lot of senators and Democrats on board, but you need the key senator, the key Democrats and Republicans. So I thought that was a great point. He mentioned a lot of points, and I'm actually putting kind of all the points together and working with him. So once again, I'll give you guys an update. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. Great to have you on board. Any other questions before I leave you to do your great work around the country? All right.
Hi, everybody.
Have a great month. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. We really appreciate you.
And it will